He appeared in over 100 episodes of a nationally televised show, became one of its most beloved cast members, and then vanished mid-season with no farewell, no on-screen goodbye, and no statement from anyone. The show didn't mention it. The network didn't address it. The only acknowledgement that anything had changed came months later, buried in a comment reply on Instagram. His name is Tim Rose. For nearly a decade, he was the heartbeat of Barnwood Builders, the Air Force veteran with the dry wit, the mechanical mind, and a tradition so simple it somehow became iconic. And when he left, he did it exactly the way he'd always done everything else. Quietly, without making it about himself. By the end of this video, you'll understand not just what happened to Tim Rose, but why his exit says more about the man than any episode of that show ever did. Long before Tim Rose ever stood in front of a television crew, he was standing inside the belly of a military aircraft. For 10 years, Tim served in the United States Air Force as an aircraft mechanic. That is not a background built for television. It's a background built for precision, for patience, and for solving problems that most people don't even know exist. You learn to work methodically. You learn that speed without accuracy costs lives. And you learn to function as part of a unit, not as an individual looking for credit. When Tim left the Air Force, he carried that discipline with him. He wasn't looking for a spotlight. He was looking for work that mattered. And somewhere in the mid-2000s, that search led him to a man named Mark Bowe and to a West Virginia-based operation called Barnwood Living. This matters because Tim didn't come to the show as a TV personality. He came as a craftsman. He joined the Barnwood Living crew in 2006, a full 7 years before Barnwood Builders ever aired. That means by the time the cameras showed up in 2013, Tim had already been doing this work for 7 seasons without an audience. He already knew the job. He already knew the crew. He already had the kind of trust that takes years to build. That's a different entry point than most reality TV cast members have. Most people in that world arrive for the camera. Tim arrived for the work. The camera just eventually caught up with him. What happened in those first years on television changed everything, but not in the way most people assume. When Barnwood Builders premiered on the DIY network on November 1st, 2013, it was a quiet show about a specific kind of work, finding old barns and log cabins on the edge of collapse and giving them another 100 years of life. The concept was simple. The audience was niche, and then it wasn't. Tim Rose was part of the reason for that. His role on the crew wasn't built around one specialty. He was the mechanic, which meant he understood systems. He could look at a piece of aging equipment or a structural problem that had the rest of the team stumped, and he could diagnose it. That made him indispensable on job sites. But what made him indispensable to viewers was something harder to manufacture. He was funny. Genuinely, naturally funny, in the way that people who aren't trying to be funny usually are. He didn't play to the camera. He reacted to the work, to the crew, to the absurd situations that come with pulling apart century-old structures in the middle of nowhere. And somewhere in that honesty, viewers found something they connected with. His signature moment was a tradition so small, it probably wasn't planned. At the end of each working day, when the final log or beam got strapped down and loaded, Tim would call it out. Last log. That was it. 2 words, but it became one of the most recognizable running moments in the show's history, because it was real. It was Tim saying the day was done, the work was good, and it was time to go home. By 2019, the show's own Instagram had called him the coolest guy on the crew. He had appeared in over 100 episodes. He was, by any reasonable measure, a cornerstone of the show. And if you think that was the peak of the story, stay with me, because this next part is why the whole story matters. The year 2020 changed the trajectory of a lot of things. For Barnwood Builders, it meant production pauses, logistical complications, and a crew that, like everyone else, had to figure out what the next chapter of their lives looked like. Some people used that time to reset. Some used it to reflect. And some, having spent years giving their best to a job they loved, decided it was enough. Tim Rose was already past 60 by this point. He had served his country for a decade. He had spent another decade plus helping preserve pieces of American history that would otherwise have rotted into the ground. He had shown up on over 100 television episodes. He had built tasting rooms and cabins at Springfield 1842, a working property in Halifax, Virginia, that he still visited long after the cameras had gone. He had given a lot. The pandemic didn't destroy Tim Rose's career. It gave him permission to stop. Season 12 of Barnwood Builders is where the absence first became visible. Tim appeared in the early episodes of that season, then disappeared. His final credited appearance was in the episode titled Treasure Time, which aired in September 2021. There was no explanation given on screen, no team meeting, no farewell project, no acknowledgement from Mark Bow on camera. One episode he was there, then he wasn't. Fans noticed immediately. The comment sections filled up with questions. Where was Tim? Was he okay? Had something happened? Most people who know this story stop here. But the real story starts right now. When fans began asking questions directly on the Barnwood Builders Instagram account, the show's social media team eventually responded. And when they did, the answer was characteristically simple. Tim had retired. During the pandemic, he had made the decision to step back from the show. They wished him well. That was it. No drama attached. No conflict flagged. No controversy buried underneath a carefully worded statement. The man had worked for the better part of 2 decades. On the crew since 2006. On television since 2013. And when it was time to go, he went. What's notable is what wasn't said as much as what was. There was no farewell episode produced. Tim didn't post a goodbye video. He didn't write a long Facebook post thanking fans and listing everything he was grateful for. He gave his last log, metaphorically, and walked off the job site. For a lot of people who followed the show, that silence was frustrating. They wanted closure. They wanted the kind of formal send-off the format allows for. Alex Webb, who also left in 2021, did it differently. He announced his departure on screen, addressed it on Facebook, and revealed his next chapter to fans directly. Tim took a different road entirely, and that contrast tells you something about who Tim Rose is. He had spent decades being part of a team. His identity wasn't built around being a television personality. It was built around the work. And when the work was done, there was nothing left to announce. Here's what the comments kept asking. And here's the answer they never got, until now. While the internet debated Tim's absence, Tim was already busy. Long before his exit from the show, he had built a connection to an organization called Warriors in the Field, a nonprofit dedicated to providing veterans with outdoor experiences, hunting, fishing, time in nature. The mission is simple in the way good missions usually are. Veterans often come home carrying weight that doesn't have an easy outlet. Warriors in the Field gives them one. Tim had been quietly involved with this organization for years, and after he stepped away from television, that involvement became more central to his life. In April 2022, just months after his final episode aired, Tim participated in a hog hunt organized by Warriors in the Field, donated by Mountain Meadow Hunting Preserve. The organization's people noted that when Tim got his last animal of the day, they heard him say "last hog," a deliberate nod to the phrase he had made famous on television. The man still carried his humor with him. He had just redirected it. By December 2023, Tim was using his remaining social media presence, a Facebook profile that he'd always kept low-key, to actively fundraise for Warriors in the Field. The post was direct. The organization puts 100% of its contributions toward veterans, no overhead eating into donations, no corporate buffer between the money and the people it was meant to help. This is not a side project for Tim. This is where he placed his energy after television. A veteran helping veterans. A man who spent a career working with his hands, now working with his platform, however modest, to do something that matters. One phone call, one conversation. That's all it took to change the direction of everything. Barnwood Builders didn't stop when Tim left. The show moved forward, as shows do. Season 13 premiered in April 2022. On the Magnolia Network. The show had migrated from the DIY network. New crew members joined. The core mission of the show, saving historic structures from collapse, continued. By 2024, the show was airing its 18th season. Episodes were running through July and August, featuring projects across Ohio, West Virginia, and North Carolina. The craftsmanship was still there. The work was still real, but the comment sections told a different story. Viewers who had been with the show from the beginning kept circling back to Tim. Who is this new guy? When is Tim coming back? It's not the same without him. Some of that is the natural resistance to change that comes with any long-running show. But some of it is specific to what Tim represented. He was never the loudest voice on the show. He wasn't the lead. He didn't own the company or drive the narrative. What he brought was something harder to replace than any individual skill set: authenticity. You couldn't fake the Air Force background. You couldn't manufacture the easy rapport he had with a crew he'd known for 15 years before most viewers had ever heard of the show. You couldn't recreate the last log tradition in a way that meant what it meant when Tim said it. The show continues. It always will. But there's a version of Barnwood Builders that existed from 2013 to 2021, the version with Tim Rose in it. And that version is now part of the archive. And if you think that was surprising, stay with me because this next part is why the whole story matters. Here is what we know about Tim Rose right now, based on what has actually been confirmed. He is not on television. He has no active public social media presence in any meaningful way. He is not building a brand or developing a spin-off or positioning himself for a comeback. He still visits Springfield 1842 in Virginia, the property where he helped build the tasting room, when he's in the area. He is still involved with warriors in the field. He still hunts and traps and cooks, the way he always did, the way he described himself on Facebook years ago, a hunter, trapper, guide, and cook. That's a life that existed before the cameras arrived, and it's a life that continues now that the cameras are gone. There is a pattern here that's worth paying attention to. The people who tend to last the longest in this world, the people who stay healthy and grounded through years of public exposure, are often the ones who had a clear identity before television and never let the television replace it. Tim Rose was never primarily a TV personality who happened to know how to restore barns. He was a craftsman and a veteran who happened to end up on television. That distinction sounds small. It isn't. He never talked about what he would do when the show ended. He never teased a future project or hinted at new ventures. He just kept doing what he'd always done, right up until the work in front of him changed. Tim Rose spent 10 years in service to his country. He spent another 15 years in service to something else, the idea that the things America built with its hands deserve to be preserved. More than 100 episodes, more than a decade of showing up, doing the work, and going home. What comes next for him seems to already be in motion. The veteran work isn't a retirement project, it's a continuation. Warriors in the Field gives him a mission that connects directly to who he's always been. Someone who understands discipline, service, and the quiet satisfaction of doing something that actually helps someone. If you watched Barnwood Builders during the Tim Rose years, you already know the answer to this question. But if you're newer to the show, do you think the way Tim left, with no announcement and no farewell episode, was the right call? Or did he owe it to the fans who followed him for nearly a decade to say goodbye on camera?